Reading of the Declaration of the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, Dignitas Infinita, on Human Dignity, published on the 8th of April 2024. Declaration Dignitas Infinita on Human Dignity. 4. Some grave violations of human dignity. Part 2. Sexual abuse. 43. The profound dignity inherent in human beings in their entirety of mind and body also allows us to understand why all sexual abuse leaves deep scars in the hearts of those who suffer it. Indeed, those who suffer sexual abuse experience real wounds in their human dignity. These are sufferings that can last a lifetime and that no repentance can remedy. This phenomenon is widespread in society, and it also affects the Church and represents a serious obstacle to her mission. From this stems the Church's ceaseless efforts to put an end to all kinds of abuse, starting from within. Violence against women. 44. Violence against women is a global scandal that is gaining increasing recognition. While the equal dignity of women may be recognized in words, the inequalities between women and men in some countries remain very serious. Even in the most developed and democratic countries, the concrete social reality testifies to the fact that women are often not accorded the same dignity as men. Pope Francis highlighted this when he affirmed that the organization of societies worldwide is still far from reflecting clearly that women possess the same dignity and identical rights as men. We say one thing with words, but our decisions and reality tell another story. Indeed, doubly poor are those women who endure situations of exclusion, mistreatment, and violence, since they are frequently less able to defend their rights. 45. Pope St. John Paul II recognized that much remains to be done to prevent discrimination against those who have chosen to be wives and mothers. There is an urgent need to achieve real equality in every area, equal pay for equal work, protection for working mothers, fairness in career advancements, equality of spouses with regard to family rights, and the recognition of everything that is part of the rights and duties of citizens in a democratic state. Indeed, inequalities in these areas are also various forms of violence. He also recalled that the time has come to condemn vigorously the types of sexual violence which frequently have women for their object, and to pass laws which effectively defend them from such violence. Nor can we fail, in the name of the respect due to the human person, to condemn the widespread hedonistic and commercial culture which encourages the systematic exploitation of sexuality and corrupts even very young girls into letting their bodies be used for profit. Among the forms of violence carried out on women, how can we not mention coercive abortions, which affect both mother and child, often to satisfy the selfishness of males? And how can we not mention the practice of polygamy? As the Catechism of the Catholic Church reminds us, polygamy is contrary to the equal dignity of women and men. It is also contrary to conjugal love, which is undivided and exclusive. 46. In this consideration of violence against women, one cannot condemn enough the phenomenon of femicide. On this front, the entire international community must have a coordinated and concrete commitment. As Pope Francis reiterated, our love for Mary must help us to feel appreciation and gratitude for women, for our mothers and grandmothers, who are a bastion in the life in our cities. Almost always in silence, they carry life forward. It is the silence and strength of hope. Thank you for your witness. But in thinking of our mothers and grandmothers, I want to invite you to combat a scourge that affects our American continent, the numerous cases where women are killed, and the many situations of violence that are kept quiet behind so many walls. I ask you to fight against this source of suffering by calling for legislation and a culture that repudiates every form of violence. Abortion. 47. The Church consistently reminds us that the dignity of every human being has an intrinsic character, and is valid from the moment of conception until natural death. It is precisely the affirmation of such dignity that is the inalienable prerequisite for the protection of a personal and social existence, and also the necessary condition for fraternity and social friendship to be realized among all the peoples of the earth. On account of the intangible value of human life, the Church's magisterium has always spoken out against abortion. In this regard, Pope St. John Paul II writes, "Among all the crimes which can be committed against life, procured abortion has characteristics making it particularly serious and deplorable. But today, in many people's consciences, the perception of its gravity has become progressively obscured. The acceptance of abortion in the popular mind, in behavior, and even in law itself is a telling sign of an extremely dangerous crisis of the moral sense, which is becoming more and more incapable of distinguishing between good and evil, even when the fundamental right to life is at stake. Given such a grave situation, we need now more than ever to have the courage to look the truth in the eye, and to call things by their proper name, without yielding to convenient compromises or to the temptation of self-deception. In this regard, the reproach of the prophet is extremely straightforward. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness." From the book of Isaiah, chapter 5, verse 20. Especially in the case of abortion, there is a widespread use of ambiguous terminology, such as interruption of pregnancy, which tends to hide abortion's true nature and to attenuate its seriousness in public opinion. Perhaps this linguistic phenomenon is itself a symptom of an uneasiness of conscience. But no word has the power to change the reality of things. Procured abortion is the deliberate and direct killing, by whatever means it is carried out, of a human being in the initial phase of his or her existence, extending from conception to birth. Unborn children are thus the most defenceless and innocent among us. Nowadays, efforts are made to deny them their human dignity, and to do with them whatever one pleases, taking their lives and passing laws, preventing anyone from standing in the way of this. It must therefore be stated with all force and clarity, even in our time, that this defence of unborn life is closely linked to the defence of each and every other human right. It involves the conviction that a human being is always sacred and inviolable, in any situation and at every stage of development. Human beings are ends in themselves, and never a means of resolving other problems. Once this conviction disappears, so do solid and lasting foundations for the defence of human rights, which would always be subject to the passing whims of the powers that be. Reason alone is sufficient to recognize the inviolable value of each single human life. But if we look at the issue from the standpoint of faith, every violation of the personal dignity of a human being cries out in vengeance to God, and is an offence against the Creator of the individual. In this context, it is worth recalling Saint Teresa of Calcutta's generous and courageous commitment to the defence of every person conceived. Surrogacy. 48. The Church also takes a stand against the practice of surrogacy, through which the immensely worthy child becomes a mere object. On this point Pope Francis's words have a singular clarity. The path to peace calls for respect for life, for every human life, starting with the life of the unborn child in the mother's womb, which cannot be suppressed or turned into an object of trafficking. In this regard I deem deplorable the practice of so-called surrogate motherhood, which represents a grave violation of the dignity of the woman and the child, based on the exploitation of situation of the mother's material needs. A child is always a gift and never the basis of a commercial contract. Consequently, I express my hope for an effort by the international community to prohibit this practice universally. 49. First and foremost, the practice of surrogacy violates the dignity of the child. Indeed, every child possesses an intangible dignity that is clearly expressed, albeit in a unique and differentiated way, at every stage of his or her life, from the moment of conception, at birth, growing up as a boy or a girl, and becoming an adult. Because of this unalienable dignity, the child has the right to have a fully human and not artificially induced origin, and to receive the gift of a life that manifests both the dignity of the giver and that of the receiver. Moreover, acknowledging the dignity of the human person also entails recognizing every dimension of the dignity of the conjugal union and of human procreation. Considering this, the legitimate desire to have a child cannot be transformed into a right to have a child, but fails to respect the dignity of that child as the recipient of the gift of life. 50. Surrogacy also violates the dignity of the woman, whether she is coerced into it or chooses to subject herself to it freely, for in this practice the woman is detached from the child growing in her and becomes a mere means, subservient to the arbitrary gain or desire of others. This contrasts in every way with the fundamental dignity of every human being, and with each person's right to be recognized, always individually, and never as an instrument for another. Euthanasia and assisted suicide. 51. There is a special case of human dignity violation that is quieter but is swiftly gaining ground. It is unique in how it utilizes a mistaken understanding of human dignity to turn the concept of dignity against life itself. This confusion is particularly evident today in discussions surrounding euthanasia. For example, laws permitting euthanasia or assisted suicide are sometimes called death with dignity acts. With this, there is a widespread notion that euthanasia or assisted suicide is somehow consistent with the respect for the dignity of the human person. However, in response to this, it must be strongly reiterated that suffering does not cause the sick to lose their dignity, which is intrinsically and inalienably their own. Instead, suffering can become an opportunity to strengthen the bonds of mutual belonging and gain greater awareness of the precious value of each person to the whole human family. 52. Certainly, the dignity of those who are critically or terminally ill calls for all suitable and necessary efforts to alleviate their suffering through appropriate palliative care and by avoiding aggressive treatments or disproportionate medical procedures. This approach corresponds with the enduring responsibility to appreciate the needs of the sick person, care needs, pain relief, and affective and spiritual needs. However, an effort of this nature is entirely different from, and is indeed contrary to, a decision to end one's own life, or that of another person who is burdened by suffering. Even in its sorrowful state, human life carries a dignity that must always be upheld, that can never be lost, and that calls for unconditional respect. Indeed, there are no circumstances under which human life would cease from being dignified and could, as a result, be put to an end. Each life has the same value and dignity for everyone. The respect of the life of another is the same as the respect owed to one's own life. Therefore, helping the suicidal person to take his or her own life is an objective offence against the dignity of the person asking for it. Even if one would be thereby fulfilling the person's wish, we must accompany people towards death, but not provoke death or facilitate any form of suicide. Remember that the right to care and treatment for all must always be prioritized, so that the weakest, particularly the elderly and the sick, are never rejected. Life is a right, not death, which must be welcomed, not administered, and this ethical principle concerns everyone, not just Christians or believers. As mentioned above, the dignity of each person, no matter how weak or burdened by suffering, implies the dignity of us all.